Chapter 7: Control and Coordination. Regulation of life. We have learnt about various life processes like nutrition, respiration, excretion, digestion, etc., which are essential for the survival of every individual. In all living organisms, life processes such as digestion and respiration, growth and development must occur simultaneously one after the other because these activities are directly or indirectly linked with each other. For example, food material taken in through ingestion has to be digested and later oxidized to obtain energy through the process of respiration. This energy is utilized for growth and development of the organism. Thus, there is a need for proper regulation of these life activities for a better survival of the living organisms. Movement is a characteristic feature of all living things. Both plants and animals show movement, but movements in animals are noticeable and fast, whereas in plants, the movement is not spotted readily. Germination is the first stage in the life cycle of a plant seed, which ultimately develops into a seedling. The movement of the seedling is because of its growth. If growth is prevented, the seedling does not show any movement. Some of the movements exhibited by many animals and some plants are not related to growth. Let us look into some examples to understand this. Mimosa plant, commonly known as touch-me-not plant, closes its leaves on touching. Thus, if we consider the examples of mimosa plant and the seedling, we can conclude that the plants exhibit two types of movements. One movement is growth-dependent movement, as shown by the seed growing into a seedling. The other type is growth-independent movement, as shown by the leaves of the mimosa plant. A cow grazing in the field, birds flying in the sky, or your pet dog running on ground are all examples of growth-independent movements. We associate all visible movements with life. The movements may be in response to a change in the environment of the organism. As animals cannot prepare their own food, they move from one place to another in search of food, water, and shelter. They run to escape from their enemies. Some movements are made by the living organisms to benefit from the changes in their environment. Plants tend to show movement in response to sunlight, air, and water. Roots of plant show downward movement of growth towards water. Plants bend towards sunlight for their growth. Herbivores or grass-eating animals such as cows, buffaloes, and deer feed primarily on grass, leaves, and hay. The herbivorous animals are unable to directly break down the cellulose present in the complex plant materials due to the absence of cellulase enzyme in their digestive system. The undigested and partly digested food is called cud. The cud stored in the rumen later returns to the mouth in small amounts. The animal keeps on chewing this cud continuously. This movement helps in breaking up complex food to facilitate better digestion. Movements are also made to protect ourselves in response to any change detected. For instance, when bright light is focused on the eyes, the pupil of the eyes contract. Similarly, on touching a hot object, we quickly withdraw our hands. All the movements made in response to any change in the environment are carefully controlled. The change in the surroundings elicits a suitable movement in response depending on the event that triggers it. Coordination. What is coordination? In any multicellular organism, there are various tissue systems and organ systems. For proper functioning of an organism, there has to be a perfect coordination among different organs and systems and various stimuli from their surroundings. For example, in higher plants, the process of photosynthesis and respiration are linked to each other for the purpose of exchange of gases. In human beings, digestive system is linked to circulatory system for the supply of absorbed food materials to the cells. In digestive system itself, coordination occurs between different digestive glands and organs. It is necessary that all the organs and systems should function together in a systematic and controlled manner to carry out a particular life process. In other words, the various organs should cooperate with one another. Thus, control refers to the systematic regulation of various activities and coordination means the orderly execution of these activities. This results in proper growth and development of the organism. Nervous system in animals. Multicellular organisms have specialized tissues associated with the control and coordination. The structural organization of the nervous system in animals depend on the complexity of the organism. In case of unicellular protozoan amoeba, we do not find a nervous system. The cell is sensitive enough to control all its life processes and activities through its body surface. In case of certain coelentrates like Hydra, the nervous system is at a very primitive stage of development. It has a network of nerve cells joined to one another and spread throughout its body. In case of annelidans like earthworm, number of nerve cells come together and form a cluster called ganglion. These clusters are joined together to form a beaded structure called the nerve cord. In higher animals, the system of control and coordination is more complex. Let us now understand about the control and coordination in human beings. Control and coordination in human beings. In human beings, different activities take place simultaneously. For example, life processes such as respiration and circulation. The oxygen taken inside the body through respiration is transported to different parts of the body through circulation. These related activities are well coordinated within the body. Apart from these, there are other metabolic activities which, although take place simultaneously, are still coordinated efficiently and effectively inside the body. The coordination of different activities of the body are controlled by two mechanisms, namely the nervous control and the chemical control. Let us now study the human nervous system. Human nervous system. The nervous system in human beings is divided into three branches, namely the central nervous system or CNS, the peripheral nervous system or PNS, and the autonomic nervous system or ANS. The central nervous system comprises of the brain and the spinal cord. The central nervous system regulates all the activities of the body. The peripheral nervous system includes all the nerves. The cylindrical bundle of nerve fibers constitute a nerve. The nerves form a complex network that spreads throughout the body. They connect all the parts of the body to the central nervous system. The autonomic nervous system comprises of nerves present in the involuntary organs which carry out functions that are not controllable at will. For example, heart, stomach, lungs, etc. On the basis of function, the nerves are divided into afferent nerves and efferent nerves. The nerves which carry the information from different parts of the body to the central nervous system are known as afferent nerves, while the nerves which carry instructions from the central nervous system to the different parts of the body are called efferent nerves. The nervous system consists of two types of cells, the neurons and the neuroglia. The neurons or nerve cells are specialized cells capable of coordinating various actions of the body and transmitting electrochemical signals to all the body parts. The neuroglia are non-neuronal cells which provide support and nutrition and maintain homeostasis. In human beings, control and coordination is properly executed with the help of sense organs. Let us study about these sense organs. Sense organs. There are 5 sense organs in our body, namely the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. We receive a variety of information from the surrounding environment through these sensory organs. Special receptors are present within these sense organs. These receptor cells are sensitive to a particular type of stimulus. For example, the eyes have photoreceptors to detect light. The ears have sound receptors to detect sound. The skin has thermoreceptors to detect temperature. The nose has receptors to detect smell. These are known as the olfactory receptors. Smells reach the olfactory receptors by 2 ways. The first pathway is through our nostrils, and the second pathway is through a channel that connects the roof of the throat region to the nose. When we chew our food, aromas are released that access the olfactory receptors through this channel. If the channel is blocked, in situations when our noses are stuffed up from a cold or flu, smells cannot reach the sensory cells and much of our ability to enjoy a food's flavor is lost. Thus, smell is an important part of tasting and enjoying food that we eat. Activity. Let us perform an activity to understand the importance of olfactory receptors in tasting and enjoying food that we eat. Take some sugar and put it in your mouth. Can you sense the sweetness? Yes. Now block your nose by pressing it between your thumb and index finger. Have some more sugar and taste it. Can you notice any difference in the taste? Yes, the sugar doesn't taste as before. Try blocking your nose in the same way while eating lunch. Can you fully appreciate the taste of the food you are eating? No. In the 2 cases when the nose was blocked, you couldn't fully appreciate the taste. When the nasal channel is blocked, the aromas released from the food cannot reach the olfactory receptors. Thus, we can conclude that the olfactory receptors play an important role in tasting and enjoying food that we eat. The tongue has receptors to detect the taste of food that we eat. These receptors are known as gustatory receptors. There are distinct regions on the tongue where the different tastes are detected. Taste buds present at the tip of the tongue detect sweet taste. Those present at the back detect bitter taste. Taste buds on the side of the tongue can detect salty and sour tastes. The taste buds on the tongue transmit the information about the different tastes in the form of a message to the brain. Brain processes the information and tells us what type of food we actually are eating. The nerve cell is the coordinating unit of the nervous system. Let us now study the structure of a nerve cell and the conduction of impulses through nerves. Structure of a nerve cell and conduction of impulses. Neurons are the basic structural and functional units of nervous system. A neuron consists of three main parts, namely the cell body, which is an enlarged part of neuron, with a nucleus in the center, axon, which is a nerve fiber, and dendrites. The dendrites and axons can be called as the processes of the cell body. We come to know that an object is hot or cold by the sense of touch. This information is picked up by the specialized tips of dendrites of a neuron. After this, a chemical reaction is set off. An electrical impulse is produced, which travels from dendrite to the cell body. From the cell body, the impulse travels through the axon to its end. At the end of the first axon, the electrical impulse induces the release of some chemicals. These chemicals pass through a small gap of 2 to 20 nanometers known as synapse, present between the neurons. They start a similar electrical impulse in the dendrite of the next neuron. This is the procedure by means of which the impulses travel in the body. Thus, impulses from the neurons are delivered to the muscle cells or glands. The muscle tissue brings about different actions or movements. For the movement to be done, the muscle cells must move. The movement takes place when the muscle cells change their shape. Due to this, the muscle cells shorten. Muscle cells possess special kinds of contractile proteins. These proteins not only bring about a change in the shape of the muscle cells, but also make them capable of responding to the nervous electrical impulse. Thus, the nervous tissue is composed of a highly organized network of neurons capable of transferring information in the form of electrical impulses from one part of the body to another. The small gap in between the consecutive neurons is known as synapse, through which impulse is conducted by chemical means. As we have studied the conduction of impulses through neurons, let us now understand the different types of neurons performing specialized functions. Classification of neurons. The neurons are classified into three groups, namely the sensory neurons, the motor neurons, and the association neurons. Sensory neurons or the afferent neurons transmit sensory impulses from the skin and other sensory organs or from various places within the body towards the central nervous system. Motor neurons or efferent neurons transmit nerve impulses from the central nervous system towards effectors, target cells such as muscles, sweat glands, and exocrine glands that produce some kind of response. Association neurons or interneurons are located in the central nervous system and transmit impulses from sensory neurons to motor neurons. Let us study some examples which will reflect our responses to certain situations in our day-to-day life. While crossing the road, if we see a motor car coming towards us with our eyes, our hand is raised up to signal the car to stop. If this is not possible, then suddenly we increase our walking speed and try to cross the road quickly so that the car can pass through without any accident. When we smell something delicious with our nose, our mouth starts watering and we feel the urge to eat that delicious food. When we suddenly hear a loud noise with our ears, we are startled and we try to find out the cause behind this event. When we step on a very sharp object with a bare foot, our skin gets hurt and we suddenly scream. As we analyze these four situations, we understand that different sense organs are involved in gathering the information from the environment. As a result, a sudden reaction takes place in response to such situations. Reflex action. Whenever there is any sudden action in response to some happening in the environment, it is called reflex. In a reflex action, we react to certain situations without thinking about it or sometimes without feeling in control of our reactions. These actions are in response to the stimulus received from our surrounding. Let us understand how control and coordination is maintained under such situations with the help of an example. Consider the act of touching a vessel containing very hot tea. It is a dangerous situation for us. In this case, we realize the pain and chances of getting wounded. Hence, we withdraw our hand. Under such situations, there is a possibility of two types of reactions, one which occurs slowly and the other which occurs instantaneously. If the impulses were to be conducted through the neurons, then it would take quite some time for us to react to the situation. But the responses to such reactions are quick and immediate. There is a rapid response to the stimulus of heat. Let us see how this happens. Instead of detecting and processing the heat sensation, the nerves that sense heat are connected to the nerves that bring about the movement of the muscle. The nerves from all over the body meet in a bundle, commonly called as the spinal cord, from where the impulses are sent to the brain. Hence, reflex arcs are formed in the spinal cord, although the messages reach the brain. In case of touching the hot object, the pathway for the conduction of impulses of heat is sensed by the thermoreceptors of the skin. This triggers the impulse to sensory neurons, from where message is transmitted to spinal cord. Impulse is further passed on to relay neuron, which in turn passes it to motor neuron. The motor neuron passes the impulse to the muscle cells in our arm. The muscles act as an effector organ because it responds to the stimulus perceived by it by exhibiting the withdrawal movement of hand. This pathway along which the impulse travels is called the reflex arc. Reflex arc is thus the shortest route that can be taken by an impulse from a receptor to an effector organ. Now, let us understand why such reflex actions and reflex arcs were evolved. In animals, the thinking process of the brain is a bit slow. Especially in many lower animals, the complex neuronal network necessary for the thinking is absent or rather not well developed. Hence, reflex arcs have been evolved as an efficient way of functioning in the absence of the true thought processes. In spite of the presence of complex neuron networks, reflex arcs continue to be more efficient for quick responses. Blinking of eyes, withdrawal of hand on touching a hot object, and watering of mouth at the sight of tamarinds are all examples of reflex actions. Let us now understand the sequence of events occurring when bright light is focused on the eyes. When bright light is focused on the eyes, the photoreceptors present in the eye produce impulses in the sensory nerves. These impulses are carried to the brain through the sensory nerves. The brain receives the signals and produces a response to reduce the amount of light entering the eye. The response signal is carried by the motor nerves to the effectors. The circular muscles of the iris of the eye are the effectors. The circular muscles of the iris contract, thereby reducing the size of the pupil. This reduces the amount of light entering the eye. The reduction in size of the pupil in bright light is a reflex action. As the reflex arc is formed along the receptor, brain and the effector, it is known as cerebral reflex. Now, can you explain what is a reflex action? A sudden action in response to some happening in the environment is called reflex action. Moving our hand away from a hot vessel when we touch it, or moving our feet away when we step on something sharp are the examples of reflex actions. These responses are quick and instantaneous. The nerves that detect the stimulus are connected to the nerves that bring about the response. The reflex arcs are formed in the spinal cord. The reflexes are produced in the spinal cord, but the message reaches the brain as well. Such rapid, automatic responses to a particular stimulus are not under the voluntary control of the brain. Let us now understand the central nervous system, its components and functional aspects. Central nervous system. The central nervous system is a delicate structure composed of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain is protected by a bony structure called the cranium or skull, while the spinal cord is protected by the vertebral column or the backbone. The space between the soft central nervous system and the bone is filled by the protective membranes called as meninges. The brain as well as the spinal cord is surrounded by these membranes. There are cavities present on the different parts of the brain known as ventricles, while the spinal cord has a long cavity called the central canal. The ventricles, central canal, and the space between the meninges are filled with cerebrospinal fluid or CSF. The cerebrospinal fluid provides nourishment to the central nervous system and also protects it by absorbing mechanical shocks. Many of our actions like walking, running, clapping hands, or lifting an object are voluntary in nature. We think before doing them. Muscles are involved in all these movements. The brain sends message to the muscles and they act accordingly. In a reflex action also, the muscles are involved but they act on the signals communicated to them by the spinal cord. A communication system exists between central nervous system and the other parts of the body. This system is known as peripheral nervous system or PNS. Peripheral nervous system includes the nerves which arise from the brain and the spinal cord. The cranial nerves arise from the brain and the spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord. The brain is the main coordinating center of the body. Let us now study the structure and functions of the brain. Structure and function of human brain. The brain makes us think and we act based on our thinking. For example, if we see something falling on the ground, then we think about picking it up. We bend down and then lift the object. The brain is a complex structure with different centers responsible for integrating various inputs and outputs. It is divided into 3 distinct regions, namely the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The cerebrum is the largest region of the forebrain. It is the main thinking center. It has regions which receive the sensory impulses from various receptors. The sense organs are the main receptors. The areas for smell, hearing, vision are separately located. There are different areas where sensory information is received and interpreted. It is put together with the information received from other receptors as well as the information that is already stored in the brain. Such areas where information is put together are known as association centers. On the basis of all this, a decision is taken on the way to respond. The necessary information is sent to the motor areas which control the movement of the voluntary muscles. The cerebrum has motor areas from which instructions are sent to muscles to do various types of movements. It is interesting to know that each side of our brain controls the opposite side of the body. The left side of the brain controls speaking, writing, and logical thinking, while the right side controls artistic abilities. Also, it is interesting to know how the memory works. Sensory memory is brief. It tells us what is happening around. Short-term memory lasts only for a short while, up to 30 seconds. The example of short-term memory is that of us remembering a phone number and dialing it. It vanishes after some time. Long-term memory is for things that we have carefully learnt and memorized. After studying about the voluntary movements, now can you name the cells which perform voluntary actions after receiving the message from the brain? The muscle cells are the one which receive the message from the brain and perform voluntary actions like walking, clapping hands, or picking things from ground. Let us discuss about the involuntary actions. We never think about breathing or pumping of the blood from heart. There are certain actions that take place in our body which are neither reflex actions nor voluntary actions. These actions occur due to movements which are beyond the control of one's will or volition. For example, beating of heart due to movements of cardiac muscles. Such actions are called involuntary actions. They are controlled by the midbrain and the hindbrain. The midbrain controls reflex movements of the head, neck, and trunk. Involuntary activities like blood flow, breathing, sneezing, peristaltic movements of the alimentary canal, etc. are controlled by medulla, which is a part of hindbrain. Another component of the hindbrain is cerebellum. It is responsible for coordinating the voluntary movements. It also maintains the balance of our body. This enables us to make accurate movements in activities like dancing, riding a bicycle, picking up an object from the floor, running along a straight line, etc. It is not only the nervous system that coordinates the activities of human beings, but there is also an endocrine system or the hormonal system which works along with it. Endocrine system. There are different endocrine glands present in human beings. These include the pineal gland, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, thyroid gland, parathyroid glands, thymus, pancreas, and adrenal glands. Testes found only in males and ovaries found only in females. The positioning of each of these glands in the body differs. Pineal gland and hypothalamus are situated in the brain. Pituitary gland is present just below the brain. Thyroid gland is attached to the windpipe in the neck region. Parathyroid glands are embedded into the thyroid gland. Thymus gland lies in the lower part of the neck and upper part of chest. Pancreas is just below the stomach in the body. Adrenal glands are located on top of 2 kidneys. Testes, present only in males, form a part of the male reproductive system. Ovaries, present only in females, form a part of the female reproductive system. The endocrine glands perform several functions. The endocrine glands secrete a chemical substance called hormone. Let us study the hormones secreted from these glands and their specific functions. Pineal gland secretes hormone melatonin, which is responsible for skin color. Hypothalamus produces releasing hormones and inhibitory hormones which regulate secretions of pituitary gland. The secretions of the pituitary gland control the functions of all endocrine glands. Growth hormone is one of the hormones secreted by the pituitary gland. It regulates growth and development of the body. The deficiency of this hormone in childhood leads to stunted growth, leading to dwarfism. Gigantism and dwarfism are the result of variation of the growth hormone secreted by the pituitary gland. Thyroid gland secretes hormone thyroxine, which contains iodine. This hormone controls metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Parathyroid glands secrete a hormone, parathormone, which regulates calcium and phosphate levels in the blood. Thymus gland secretes thymic hormones which plays a role in the development of immune system. Pancreas secretes insulin which controls blood sugar level. Adrenal glands secrete adrenaline hormone which regulates heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate and carbohydrate metabolism. Testes make male sex hormone testosterone which control the development of male sex organs and male features at puberty. Ovaries make estrogen and progesterone which control development of female sex organs and female features at puberty. Progesterone controls the uterine changes during the menstrual cycle. We have discussed about different glands in our body, the hormones secreted by them and their specific functions. Now, can you explain why it is important for us to have iodized salt in our diet? The hormone thyroxine produced by the thyroid gland contains iodine. This hormone controls the metabolism of carbohydrates, fats and proteins in the body. Iodine is necessary for the production of thyroxine. The deficiency of iodine in the diet produces less thyroxine and causes a disease known as goiter. The iodized salt contains appropriate amount of iodine compound, potassium iodide, which can provide the necessary iodine. It is the most economical, convenient and effective way of controlling goiter. The endocrine system effectively controls coordination through the hormones secreted by various endocrine glands. Let us proceed to explore how the hormones bring about chemical control in human beings. Chemical control. The chemical control is brought about by hormones. The endocrine glands secrete hormones in our body. These glands are called the ductless glands because they do not have any duct to store or transport their secretions. The glands secreting the hormone are localized. The hormones produced by these glands are directly released into the bloodstream. From there, the hormones reach all the parts of the body through the transporting fluid, blood. The endocrine system shares its responsibility of control and coordination with the nervous system. Both these systems work in cooperation to integrate and control various activities of the body. There is a significant difference between the mechanism of functioning of these two systems. The nervous impulses are rapid and usually of a short duration, while the hormonal action is much slower but long-lasting. Let us understand this with the help of an example of an animal in the jungle. Suppose a rabbit is caught in a scary situation of facing its predator. The rabbit has to prepare itself either to face the situation and fight or to escape from there. Both of these activities are extremely complicated. These activities will utilize great deal of energy in controlled ways. The nervous system will exert its action and instruct the axonal knobs of the neurons to come in contact with the muscle cells at the neuromuscular junction. This will stimulate the rabbit to perform either of the activity. If the body of the rabbit entirely relies on the electrical impulses generated through the nerve cells, then the range of tissues instructed to perform the activity would become limited. On the other hand, if the chemical signals in the form of hormones are sent, then through blood, they would reach all the parts of the body. This will allow the rabbit to perform a wide range of activities. The secretions of endocrine glands sometimes influence the actions of brain. Such a situation occurs in the case of many animals, including human beings. In this situation, the response is elicited by a hormone called adrenaline. Adrenaline is secreted by the adrenal glands. When adrenaline is secreted directly into the blood, it is carried to different organs of the body. One of the target organs on which adrenaline acts is the heart. It results in an increase in the rate of heartbeat, leading to an increased blood flow to the muscle tissues. This results in the supply of more oxygen to the muscles. The muscles around small arteries of the digestive system and skin contracts, due to which there is a reduction in the flow of blood to these organs. It leads to the diversion of more blood to the skeletal muscles. The diaphragm and the rib muscles contracts, leading to an increase in the breathing rate. All these reactions enable the body to face an emergency situation. Let us understand how do these hormones actually work. The hormones should be secreted according to their requirement in the body. A specific mechanism is required for their release from the glands. The required quantity of hormone released as well as the time of release are regulated by feedback mechanism. For example, consider the endocrine gland pancreas, which secretes hormone insulin. When the sugar level of blood rises, it is detected by the cells of the pancreas. The secretory cells of pancreas respond to the situation by producing more insulin. When the sugar level of blood falls, the secretion of insulin is lowered. Thus, we can conclude that the nervous system facilitating nervous control and the endocrine system facilitating chemical control functions together in the control and coordination in animals including human beings. Coordination in plants. Plants absorb water, in which minerals are dissolved from the soil with the help of their roots. For effective absorption by the root system, there has to be some loss of water from the plant. This process of loss of water from the plants is known as transpiration. It is carried out by the transpiring organs of the plants. Transpiration takes place in the leaves through the stomata. The process of transpiration is followed by an upward movement of water and minerals inside the plant, like ascent of sap from the roots. Ascent of sap is actually the process of translocation of water from the roots to the shoot region. The absorbed minerals are then utilized for various metabolic activities. For these processes, that is, for transpiration, translocation and absorption to take place, there should be availability of enough quantity of water with dissolved minerals in the soil where the plant is growing. Then only all these processes will function smoothly. Thus, a coordination exists between different life processes occurring in plants. Animals have muscles with the help of which they are able to perform different movements. They also have a nervous system for controlling and coordinating the activities of the body. Plants do not possess a nervous system like animals. The muscular system is also absent in plants. Then how do plants show different movements? Let us learn about it. The movements exhibited by plants are mainly in response to the stimulus. The stimulus can be internal or external in nature. In a sensitive plant like mimosa, the movement of closing of leaflets is a response to the stimulus of touch. When we touch the leaflets close. They open after some time. This movement, which occurs in response to the stimulus of touch, is known as seismonastic movement. There is no growth involved in this movement. The closing of the leaflets is due to the osmotic movement in the cells of the pulvinus, which is a swollen petiole of a leaf base. Germination is the first stage in the life cycle of a plant seed, which ultimately develops into a seedling. The movement of the seedling is because of its growth. If growth is prevented, the seedling does not show any movement. Thus, if we consider the examples of mimosa plant and the seedling, we can conclude that the plants exhibit two types of movements. One movement is growth-dependent movement, as shown by the seed growing into a seedling. The other type is growth-independent movement, as shown by the leaves of the mimosa plant. Movements in plants which are growth-independent. Certain movements of plants, like those shown by the mimosa plant, does not result in their growth. They are termed as growth-independent movements. Hormones, which are the chemical messengers, bring about various movements in plants in response to certain stimuli. When we observe some movements of plants, we can see that change occurs at a place different from the place where the stimulus was received. For example, if we touch the tip of the leaflets of mimosa plant, folding occurs. This movement is not only at the tip, but the entire leaf, including the leaf base. Thus, movement occurs at a place different from the place of touch. Thus, we can conclude that information regarding some form of contact must have been communicated. Plants do not have any specialized tissue or an organ which can conduct the information to different cells. The plants use chemicals as signals to transfer the information from one cell to another. In response to these chemicals, the plant cells change their shape by altering the amount of water in them, which ultimately results in the movement of the parts of the plant. The cells either swell if there is intake of water, or they shrink if they lose water. That is, a cell becomes turgid or flaccid. This results in the movement of the parts of the plant. Movements in plants which are growth-dependent. The movement or growth of any part of a plant in response to external stimulus is called tropism or tropic movement. The reaction of a tendril is thus a tropic movement in response to the stimulus of touch. The shoot system of any plant responds to the stimulus of light by growing in the direction of light. Let us discuss about some examples of plants showing growth-dependent movements. You must have seen the climbers clinging and growing on a support. They manage to keep themselves erect so that they can receive sunlight. These climbers have special modified structures called tendrils. The tendrils help the plant in clinging to the support. Tendrils are sensitive to the stimulus of touch. When the tip of a tendril comes in contact with any object, the portion of the tendril which is in contact shows sluggish growth, whereas growth is steady and comparatively faster at the other parts of the tendril. This causes the tendril to coil itself around the object and thus cling to it. The grapevine, pea plants and gourds are the examples of climbers having tendrils. In a grapevine, the bud is modified as a tendril, and in a pea plant, the leaf tip is modified as a tendril. We have studied about the response of the plants to the stimulus of touch, but it is not the only stimulus to which a plant can respond. Let us study about the other types of stimuli that can be perceived by the plants which ultimately result in their growth. If we keep a potted plant near the window in a room, the stem of the plant bends slightly towards the window. That is, it responds to the sunlight entering through the window. Even the leaves of the plant turn towards the sun. This movement shown by the plant is called phototropic movement. Plants need sunlight, and so the shoots respond to sunlight by growing towards it. When light falls on a part of growing plant, a hormone called auxin is synthesized. The hormone is synthesized at the shoot tip that helps the cells to grow longer. As the light is falling on one side of the plant, the hormone slowly diffuses towards the shady part of the shoot and stimulates the cells to grow longer. Hence, the plant appears to bend towards light. Let us perform an activity to understand about the phototropic movement in plants. Take a conical flask and fill it with water. Place a wire mesh on the flask so that it covers the neck of the flask. On the wire mesh, place 3 freshly germinated bean seeds. Take a cardboard box which is open from one side. Keep the flask inside the box and place it near a window in such a manner that the open side of the box faces light coming from the window. Observe the setup after 2 to 3 days. What do you observe? You can observe that the shoots bend towards light and roots away from light. Now turn the flask in opposite direction so that the shoots are away from light and the roots towards light. Leave it undisturbed for 2 to 3 days. Do you observe any change? You can see that parts of the shoot and root have changed its direction. The shoot that was placed away from the light has shifted towards light, whereas the root has moved away from the direction of light. From this activity, we can conclude that the shoot of the plant exhibits positive phototropism, whereas the root exhibits negative phototropism. If we observe the root system of the plant, it responds to the stimulus of gravity as well as water. The movements occurring in response to the stimulus of gravity are known as gravitropic movements, while those occurring in response to the stimulus of water are known as hydrotropic movements. The roots of plants always tend to move towards water. As they grow downwards, they can even change their direction and grow sideways in search of water. The plant shows yet another type of movement in response to certain chemicals. This movement shown by the parts of the plant in response to certain chemicals is known as chemotropism. This type of movement is shown by the pollen tube. Growth of the pollen tube takes place in response to chemicals secreted by the cells of embryo sac. The pollen grains germinate on the surface of stigma and the pollen tube grows towards the ovule situated in the carpel. Later, the pollen grains fertilize the ovum situated in the ovule to form the zygote. Plant hormones. We have studied that auxins are responsible for growth in the tip region of the shoots. But it is not the only hormone present in plants. Gibberellins, cytokinins, abscisic acid are the other hormones present in the plant body. Gibberellins help in the growth of the stem, while cytokinins promote cell division. Cytokinins are found in greater concentrations in the areas where rapid cell division takes place. It is thus found in fruits and seeds. Auxins, gibberellins, and cytokinins help in promoting growth of plants, but all plant hormones are not growth promoters. Abscisic acid is a plant hormone which acts as a growth inhibitor. Its activity slows down or inhibits growth of plants. Its effect includes the wilting of leaves, falling of fruits, etc. In plants, different hormones are involved in the coordination of growth and development as well as in response to environmental changes.